Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
I'm your host today, Chris Santomasimo, and really excited to sit with Al Kennickell. Al is the president of Kinnickle Group in Savannah, Georgia. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
It's so nice to have you. As we were talking about before the podcast, one of the many things that's really intriguing about the Kinnickle Group is the fact that you guys are a third and fourth generation family business and have succeeded, despite a lot of challenges. You kind of beat the odds. And here you are as a successful company. You're the third generation, and you told me you got the fourth generation in the building already. So congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I would love for you to just tell folks that may not know the Kinnickle Group, kind of what you do and what you're good at, which is a lot of things, I know, because you got a pretty broad range of printing related services. But talk about the business and talk about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So the business was founded by my grandfather in 1892. And he, prior to starting the printing company, he actually worked as a typesetter for the Savannah Morning News. In 1932, my father and his twin brother took over the business, and they, built it up, made it pretty successful. But here's one thing that was a key factor in, why we were able to grow the business a lot more than the second generation did. And it really goes back to the Depression. My dad and his twin brother were 19 years old when the Depression started. And so they, spent a lot of their years during the Depression, which, as my dad used to tell me, you don't have any idea what poor is until you had lived through the Depression. So they were successful, but they were also very cautious. I think that if you come up through the Depression, your goal is, I don't want to go back to being poor like we were during the Depression. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I think that in the year 1932, my father, his twin brother, their father and their sister all lived above the printing company in an apartment, and the printing company that year grossed $7,500. So the $7,500 that they did in that year went to buying food, buying paper, things like that, and so it was a tough existence. But when I joined the company, I got out of college in 1977. And joined the company right then. And then, I had other family members in the business. I wasn't really comfortable with the direction some of them might have wanted to go, and was able to convince the board to elect me president of the company. And when that happened, I now had control, and we started doing things the way I wanted to do them. But when I bought the company in 1981, and at that time I really had no net worth. I didn't own a house, and so I didn't have much to lose. And I said to my uncle, I said, I'm gonna borrow $400,000, and I'm gonna buy a 4-color press. Are you in or out? And that's really what made the buy thing happen, because he wasn't interested in that. So. And then I bought my dad out at the same time, bought the 4-color press. That changed everything, because in the printing world, if you're printing 4-color process on a 2-color press, which was fairly common back then, it was hard to make something look really good. Right. So we made that move, and that was, I would say, that was the first reinvention of the business. And for there, things really took off. So that was, and I'll say this, that I probably borrowed $10 million in my career and bought equipment, things like that. And I was always very careful there's things you can do that you can make certain mistakes depending on the size of the company you are and survive them, but some you can't. But I think the biggest press we bought, I think I borrowed $2.8 million to buy a 6-color 40-inch press. And, that worked out well. But then again, in this day and time, they've got these, it's a 40-inch inkjet press. The company, it was Benny Landa, the Landa.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So people approached me about buying that, and I said, you know what? I can make a $2 million mistake and still be around. but the Landa was a $4 million device. And I said, you know what? I can't buy a $4 million piece of equipment. And if it doesn't work out, I'm probably not going to survive that. So anyways,
Well, and,
it
and
really,
here we are today, where Landa in its original form doesn't exist anymore.
yeah, yeah. So really, I think that, the key to our success was, I was aggressive and I didn't have anything to lose. So I borrowed money, brought in equipment, and it all worked out. But I will say this, that I've reinvented this business a number of times. In fact, I told my kids, I said, this is my fifth reinvention. It's my last reinvention. The next reinvention is on you guys.
Interesting. You know what's funny about it, is you got to reinvent yourself along the way in order to continue to evolve. But getting back to the family aspect, that time in 1981 or so when you bought that four-color press, you're really pushing up against the headwinds of the family dynamic in a sense. You're going to your uncle and you're issuing an ultimatum, so to speak, or making him fish or cut bait. I think a lot of family businesses have a hard time making those tough decisions or having those tough conversations, and that often leads to them not doing so well or going out of business.
Yeah, I'll say this, that we did not, as a family, we really didn't socialize that much. So it wasn't like I didn't have that I'm going to see him at Thanksgiving problem to deal with, because we just weren't doing that. But I'll give you another example. Like, if you're in a family business and the fourth generation or the generation coming after you, if they're not up to the task of running that business, you can't let them take it over. You're doing them a disservice. You're doing all the people that work in the company a disservice, because if they don't have what it takes to run it, then it's going to be a terrible thing for them to have, be the person that ran the family business out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bad thing to put people in that place. Fortunately for me, the two kids I have in this business are both very capable, and I've been coaching them up a long time, but they're aggressive go-getters, so I don't have that problem. But I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen where the next one in line just didn't have it, and the results ended up being what you would expect.
Well, when you talk about that next generation, they got to want it, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like your kids want it, and they're going to go
Yeah.
get it.
You know what's interesting about that? You're right. Let me tell you this. So what I did is I felt like they wanted it, but sometimes people will tell you they want it because they think that's what you want to hear. So I went out and I talked to some friends of mine that were in the family business, and I hired a family business consultant, and I brought him in, and his goal was for him to have long conversations with the kids and let him determine, or do they really want it? And because they could tell me they want it, but I wanted to hear it from a third party. And he interviewed these kids and me for hours and hours. And that whole drill was to get a third party to say, yes, they want it.
Right.
And once I got that word, then, I started moving in the direction of, okay, let's transition this thing.
Yeah, they can't, to your first point, and I think this is critical, they can't just go about and say, look, Dad wants to hear that we want this, or Uncle Al wants to hear it, and they're afraid to tell the right story. But, actually getting that messaging from somebody who's objective, that they can talk to and be honest with, that sounds like it was a key development for you to really be sure these kids are ready to do it.
Yeah, no, it was very critical, because, people are always going to, sometimes, not always, but people will often tell you what they think you want to hear. And that's not the case with a consultant. So that really worked out well. It was money well spent.
That's fantastic. And one thing I'm intrigued by as well, you've got that background where your dad went through and his brother went through the Depression, so they were pretty cautious folks, I'm sure. Very, they were probably ran pretty lean. They were really careful about decisions, which is important. But sometimes companies suffer from the opposite, which is you're too careful and you're not willing to take any kind of a risk. or grow, and you just become stagnant. So how'd you find that balance between that very sort of careful approach that you grew up with and being able to take the organization and move it forward?
You know, I will say this. I mean, my background was in sports. I played all sports, but I went to college on a football scholarship, and I played for three coaches that became NCAA head coach of the year, and I was very aggressive by nature. I mean, I'm looking at everything as like a game. I mean, I looked at P&Ls as scoreboards. You know, if the profit number was big, that means we scored a lot of points.
Right.
And I really kind of approached everything from that standpoint. I really got up thinking every day, I want to win. And I really approached it that way. And actually what was interesting too is when I did buy the company, even though my uncle retired right away, my father worked for me until he died 13 years later. But he never once said to me, hey, I think maybe you shouldn't do this. But, fortunately, I was doing things and it was working out, and we were growing and really get to a point where the business I was running was much bigger than the business he had run in his career. So, some of the expertise that he had didn't really translate to where we were at this point. But I've just always been, one of the keys for me, and I've been doing this my entire career, and it works for me. It may not work for everybody else, but I would come in every Saturday morning, and this is before even computers. I'd sit with an 8.5 by 11 yellow legal pad, and I would just start thinking. And I'd start thinking about what could I do? What would make us a better company? What should we do here? And then I'd start writing. And I would sometimes write 15, 20 pages of notes, just free flowing. And I believe that was some sort of a form of meditation that I was doing. But I would come and sit down with no preconceived idea of what I was going to be doing. But to be able to think when nobody's around, nobody can interrupt you, it allowed me to really, all I can say is I would stumble across some great ideas, and then we'd execute those, and it would work out. So thinking time is I think critical for a business. I'd also think this too, and this gets back to the sports analogy. I was pretty darn sure that my competition was not going to be in the office Saturday morning trying to figure out how they were going to outdo me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was certainly in the office every Saturday morning, and I was thinking about my competitors by name and how I was going to get a leg up. And I was always knew exactly what kind of equipment they had, what their strengths and weaknesses were. And I mean, there's a lot of, I just would say you got to have time to think. And if you're not thinking, if you're just, if your whole business life is, I show up on Monday morning at 8 o'clock and Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, I'm checked out, I'm done. Well, you're probably not going to do very well with that.
Well, certainly not in a leadership role like you had, right? But the week just gets so busy, no matter what you do, whether you're a printer or you're a lawyer or whatever it is, you get so busy, and it's that you are right. It's that catharsis that you have, that because you're never going to be able to free up all that information in your brain in a way that's going to ever help you unless you get away from the business and work on it as opposed to working in it.
Yeah, you got to work on it, not just in it. And I'm teaching every trick of the trade that I've used in my life to my kids, and I'm telling them you got to be able to do this, you got to do that, and hopefully it's sinking in, but I'm sure it will, because they kind of know what it takes to be successful.
What kind of response do you get from the next generation when you say things like that? How you sit at your desk with a pad of paper and a pen, as opposed to what they do now. Like, what's the reaction that you get?
Here's the difference is I'm still here and I'm still running everything. All right. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they feel the necessity to do that yet. because I'm continuing to do that. You know, they work very hard. They both are salespeople, and they're both very, very busy all the time with, you know, lots of accounts. One of them told me today, I'm now getting 100 emails a day that I have to actually deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so, but when the point comes when now it's on your back and you're the one that's going to either be successful or fail, I think they will be more than willing to get in here and do that. But you know, for me, I try to make sure I've got people in the industry I can talk to, bounce ideas off of. For instance, I'm going to D-Scoop for the first time. I've never been. That's in Denver. I'm going there on Sunday. And what I said to the D-Scoop guys when they invited me to come, and I have a lot of HP equipment, but it's all wide format equipment.
Mm-hmm.
We run Konica Minolta, KM1, inkjet, not the Indigos. But I said, is there going to be anybody there in short run packaging? And they did some research and said, yeah, we got a couple of guys here. I said, then sign me up because I need to talk to those people. But I also will be looking for people that are doing embellishments. You know, we're kind of way down the road on embellishments, but there's still, you know, if I learn one or two tricks from somebody else that I hadn't thought of yet, that pays for the trip. So, you know, I think it's important to make sure that you've got people in the industry that you can talk to. I was in peer groups early in my career, and that really that paid off well for me. And in fact, you know, what happens in a peer group, you realize if you got 8 guys, you might be smarter than 5 of them, but there's a couple there that are much smarter than you. And there was one guy in my peer group that was brilliant, and you know, he was a great guy to bounce ideas off of all the time. And that really, really paid off for me.
Yeah, and I guess it's a different form of, you know, downloading what's in your head and forming the ideas, you know, different from writing them down on a piece of paper. But when you can express it to somebody and sort of get feedback and sort of shape your thinking, that's the same kind of a process, I think. It's
Yeah.
how do you get those ideas out of your head and operationalize them? That's where a lot of folks fail if they don't have that kind of a network of people to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people need to always be on a quest for knowledge. And I tell people this too. Some of the greatest ideas I ever had came from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that. I mean, I would say maybe 1 or 2 strokes of genius I had, but of all the 20 other things that worked out really well, they came from talking to somebody else who was either doing it or was going to do it or had already done it. So, I mean, if you get out there and you're watching other people, what they're doing, and if you have the kind of relationship where everybody can be very honest and, you know, forthright of what they did and how they did it, that's invaluable. I mean, if you're sitting in your business and you never get out, you're running your business, you're doing your thing, you're talking to your customers, and you know, you're not out there in the world seeing what else is going on, you're going to be very much handicapped.
Yeah, because you really miss those opportunities and you miss the opportunities to grow and respond, right? And I think it's important too to surround yourself internally with people that are, you know, that are complementary to what you do and are good resources so that you can you can get ideas from them, obviously, but as a team, you work together to find out what the ideas are and sort of personalize them. But you need those sort of different skill sets, different viewpoints from people on your own team. And how do you find folks like that, and what do you look for when you're looking for them?
Well, I tell you, it's interesting. My key players here, I've got probably, I would say, our management team, the least senior person on my management team has been with us maybe 26 years. So me and all the key players have been together. We probably have, I bet you we have 15 people that have been here over 20 years. We probably got another 10 or 12 who've been here over 30 years. And there's 2 or 3 of us that have been here over 40 years. So, and these people are in the same positions they've been in. And I'll tell you what's really good for me. And I don't handle sales anymore. But when I was growing this business, I was the #1 sales guy. So when that happened, I'd be at work at 7 in the morning, and work on the business for 2 hours. From 9 o'clock until 4:30, I'm just dealing with clients. And then from 4:30 to 7, I was back on, doing business stuff. But since I don't have to handle clients any longer, I can be away from this business. If I was to go away for a month or two, this business would do fine. I am not needed for any day-to-day operational task. What I am is I'm sort of the vision guy. I'm the guy that's, analyzes P&Ls and I'm doing that kind of stuff, but I'm not really having to answer clients' phone calls anymore, which makes it a lot easier for me to do things. And I tell you, one thing I do that's interesting too, I've been doing this for so long. When I look at printing company P&L, specifically mine, I can, in seconds, I can pick up just really, interesting things. So what I do with my kids is I say, look, when I get the P&Ls, I email to the kids and I say, I've been over this and I found 5 things that I thought were pretty interesting in the numbers this month. I want you to see if you can find them. So I give them that assignment, and I give them a couple of days, and then we meet and we sit down and I go through every single number. We talk about everything about it. I say, number one, if you have a good P&L or a bad P&L, you have to make sure you understand why it was good or why it was bad. You can't just say, hey, it's good and not worry about why it was good. You have to be able to look at numbers and it's like the Matrix, when the guy just all of a sudden everything became clear to him. When you look at your profit and loss numbers, you've got to be able to see the story right there, understand it clearly, and understand what you need to do. So that's one of the key things I'm trying to do with the kids right now is make sure they get to the point where they can do that.
It's like everybody has to be their own CFO in a sense, as if you were a CFO that was writing comments and footnotes for the P&L to explain to a board of directors or a CEO. I think you really only get that with experience, right?
Yeah.
Ability.
Yeah. So it's I don't have a CFO, so I function as the CFO.
Yep.
And but I'll tell you, by necessity, I think when I was probably 2 or 3 years into owning the company, I was pretty darn good at looking at those numbers. And then it helped me when I had printing company friends, like in our peer groups. I had a guy that was struggling, and he was not doing well. And I said, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to come to Savannah. You're going to spend a weekend with me. You're going to bring your P&L. And I also want you to bring a list of everybody in the company who works for you, what department they're in, and what they make. And we're gonna sit down and I'm gonna help you fix some things. And he flew down, and I've got his numbers in front of me, and I start asking him, okay, I look at people, I say, what does Tom here do? And well, he does this, this, and this. I said, well, you know what? You're paying him a lot of money, and there is nobody in that role in my company. Why do you think you need that guy? And over the course of 4 or 5 hours, I cut out $600,000 worth of payroll from his company. And I said, you don't need these people. You can get rid of these folks. It's not going to hurt your business, but it's going to save your business. And then I said to him, he said he was going to do it. And then I said to him, okay, tell me when you're going to do it. He said, I'm going to do it on Monday. I said, what time you can do it on Monday? He said, I'm going to do it at 2 o'clock. I said, okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call you at 4 o'clock, and you're either going to have done it or you haven't done it. And let's see if you're serious about fixing this problem you have. Well, then he calls me on Monday and he says, look, if something's come up, I can't do it today. I'm doing it tomorrow, but you can feel free to call me at 4 o'clock tomorrow. And I called him at 4 o'clock, and he had done it. And he told me a number of times that the only reason they stayed in business was because of that. But it was just a third party looking. I mean, they had like, for instance, they spent a tremendous amount of money on a 6-color press with a lot of automation. And their thinking was this press needs to run all the time because we've got such an investment in here. So they had a press operator and two helpers. I said, why do you have two helpers? And that's what they said. Well, the press, we got to keep it running because, it's so expensive. I said, you buy a press like that, so you don't need three guys.
Right.
You need one and a half. You don't need three. And there were cases like that all through his company, and they were pretty easy to fix. But it was just a third party looking at it, and so that's, once again, I mean, it comes down to being able to look at numbers and figure out things. Like if his payroll was running, his factory payroll was maybe 28% of sales, it should have been 20. Right. And his admin was maybe like 5 points above what mine was, and so we just got those numbers back down, and that solved his problems. And their business is still around today, and we did that 30 years ago.
And what you also did, you were his coach as well. Harkening back to your football days. If not for the fact that he knew he had to answer to you, somebody he obviously respected, and make an excuse of why he hadn't executed on these things, he may not have ever done it.
You're right about that, and I will tell you that because he is the owner of the company, there was nobody going to hold him accountable. The only person that was going to hold him accountable was going to be his bank if he couldn't, pay for the equipment. So I felt like I wanted him to be successful. So the only way you could make that happen is to hold him accountable, and I think he appreciated that as well. And of course, in business, everybody has to do that. When we're implementing some new software in the company right now, it's requiring a lot of people to do a lot of different things. But for me, I'd say, okay, we will meet every Wednesday morning at 9:30 for an update, and then we'll meet. And then I used AI to help me write up an implementation plan, and I've got that plan, and I'm using it, and it talks about accountability, things like that, and I tell people, okay, next Wednesday, here's what I expect to have to be done by next Wednesday, and that's just the way you have to run a business, because if you say to somebody, I want you to get this done, but you don't give them a time frame, then they don't feel a sense of urgency to get it done right now. So you got to everybody's got to be held accountable. And I'll say this, that it starts at the top, in that I hold myself accountable. I always have. And when I had to do difficult things, like if I was going to terminate, this guy, or I was going to do some layoffs or whatever, I always said, you're going to get this done by Thursday at 2:00. And I said, you're going to get it done by then. And I made sure that I did it. And if you got to hold yourself accountable as much as everybody that works for you.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that. I think many executives, they get swayed in the wrong direction by emotion. And going back to what we started talking about at the beginning of our chat today, this idea of having tough conversations and, being able to make tough decisions is really, the buck stops with you, obviously. A lot of folks just aren't able to get past it. And, they want to be accountable. They want to do the right thing, but, they start personalizing personalizing the decisions. And that's really what distracts a lot of executives, I think.
This is another thing I preached to my kids and anybody I'm trying to help in business. I would say that if you ask the people that work for me, they've never seen me yell and scream at anybody. They've also never seen me jump up and down and be saying, yay, this is great. I try to keep emotion out of everything I do. And like if somebody does something that's just really, really makes me mad, I don't get mad. I think, okay, a problem has just happened. How do I fix it? Because when people lose their cool, when somebody's emotional, they're not thinking. And when you're not thinking, you're not solving the problem. So I've never allowed myself to be a guy that gets really high or really low. And in this company, there is no raising your voices and screaming at people. We don't do that here. And if I had people like that, I'd get rid of them because that's just not how we operate.
Yeah, you kind of have to be like the airline pilot who's dealing with a crisis where the voice
Yeah,
does never changes, right?
that's a great analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, you never hear them get frantic and manic. They just stay cool and fix the issue and hope for the best, right? That's
Hmm.
the best you can do.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah. Maybe in closing, Al, I'd love to hear, if you had suggestions about, and we covered a couple things, so maybe we're going to repeat ourselves a little bit, but somebody who's finding himself at that inflection point where they've got a problem, they don't quite understand it, they know they got to make some changes. What's the first couple things they ought to do in order to get themselves straight and on a path?
All right, I'm going to tell you something this is not something I have done historically, but I'm doing it now. So I'm going to talk about AI for a second. There's really only 2 or 3 AI tools that a person needs. All right. I would say ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity. All right. And they have different roles, but you can use Perplexity is a tool that searches the internet. So if you got a problem that you need to go out and do some research with, you use Perplexity. But with ChatGPT and Claude, and I really use Claude mostly, that is your business partner to help you think through problems. And what I've done is I have fed information into Claude and ChatGPT where they know every single thing about my business. They know the names of my kids. They know the equipment we have. I have educated it on everything about us. And if I'm trying to solve a problem, I'll say you got to learn how to write the prompts, but you might say to Claude, hey, you're a leading business consultant. And then I start saying, here's my problem, and here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Do you have any suggestions that you could help me with this? In the old days, I would have maybe thought about it for 2 or 3 days, but now I do this and I instantly get information. And then what's great about it, if people aren't using AI, if you're a business owner, you're not using AI, you're making a huge mistake. And I'll tell you this, we've hired a consultant, we pay $1,000 a month for a 90-minute call, and their job is to make sure that we're using AI to the best ability we possibly can. But AI will give me some answers, and then it gives me suggested. If people don't understand AI, they need to hear this. It will answer my question, then it will give me other prompts. You might want to ask me this because it kind of sees the direction I'm going. And so what ends up happening, I could have a 3-hour back and forth with AI on one issue. And the insights I get are pretty remarkable. And I'll say this too, most of what I do on weekends now is me and AI going back and forth on a specific issue. And it's a tremendous tool. So I will tell you that if you're a business person and your competition has learned how to use AI effectively, and you think, I don't want to have to learn something new, I'm hoping I can just sit this one out, you're going to be done. You're just going to be done. And because the people that aren't using it, and the thing I hear all the time, yeah, I tried that and AI gave me a wrong answer. I'll say, when was that? Oh, that was a year ago. A year in AI is like 50 years prior to
Right.
AI.
Right.
It's now hallucinations don't happen like they used to. Another person said to me, you know what? I asked, because around here, people now understand they better get on the AI train. But someone was trying to say to me, yeah, but I don't think AI is as good as you think it is. I asked ChatGPT, what's the price of gold? And it gave me the wrong answer. I said, yeah, because ChatGPT does not search the internet in real time. It
Right.
is just, it has knowledge. But if you ask Perplexity, what's the price of gold? You'll get that answer and it'll be accurate. So AI I'll say this, one thing that's really helped me with the International Print Network is because we're all so diversified, we do so many different things. we as an organization jumped on AI about 2.5 years ago because we all understood AI could help all of our businesses, but like a lot of the European printers are into transactional print, very foreign than what I do. I'm into embellishments and high-end stuff, which is very foreign to what some of the other guys do. But we all run businesses, and AI can help us all. So we tend to devote probably a full day at every meeting just on AI. And we bring in speakers, like the consultant that we've hired, that we do meet with every month. He actually has the same deal with me and 3 other guys from the IPM. And but he'll be speaking at Madrid, and I'm sure we'll have him in Savannah when we have this meeting again. So we're all in on this, and I just hope that the people that are watching this, if you've not really jumped on the AI, trust me, either do it or think about what you're going to do next.
That's great advice.
For a living.
Yeah, for a living, exactly. You know what? That's great advice, Al. And I have to say, your insights today were really remarkable. And I appreciate you sharing such deep insights with us today. It was good stuff.
I've learned from a lot of people in my career, and I'm very happy to help other people out any chance I can get. When you're in the business world, when business is good, it's unbelievable. When business is bad, it is horrific. And one thing we business people all share is we've all had the ups and downs, and I feel for anybody that's in a down part. And if I can help anybody, I'm happy to do it.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure the folks that listen to your discussion today are going to be helped without a doubt. So again, Al, thank you so much. It was great stuff.
Hey, I enjoyed doing it.
Good. Well, I hope you come back because I want to dig in a little bit more onto some of those things. If we keep going, we might spend all day on this podcast, but I hope you're going to come back and visit us again.
Anytime you'd like to talk. I mean, we business people, we all share some of the same issues all the time. I'm happy to share anything I can. I'm at the tail end of my career, and if I can help the folks in the front or the middle part of theirs, I'd happy to do it.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to take you up on that. So thank you again, Al. Al, this is Al Kennickell from the Kinnickle Group in Savannah, Georgia, the president, of course, of the group. And signing off today, this is Chris Santomasimo from OGC Solutions and the Think Factory podcast. We'll see you next time.